This is the story of Snow White, Fire Red. Let us be off. Away we go. There were once a queen and king who had no children. Year in, year out, this was their only sorrow. Oh, how they begged and prayed for their destiny to change. They even vowed that if they should have a child, they would build 2 fountains, one of oil and one of wine, and these fountains should flow for 7 years. Well, not long afterward, luck smiled upon them. They learned that they were going to have a child. Sure enough, they built the fountains, and the fountains flowed, one with oil and one with wine, 7 years after the birth of their son, the prince. Now, when it was nearing the end of the 7th year, an old woman came by the palace, wishing to sop up a little bit of the last of the oil. She took a sponge and soaked it in the oil, and then squeezed the drops of oil into her pitcher. She did this many times until her pitcher was nearly full. But just then, the prince, having seen the old woman, took a little rock and threw it at the old woman's pitcher. It shattered, and the oil spilled out completely and was lost. Now the old woman turned on him with a terrible scowl. "Because you are the prince, I can do nothing to punish you, but know this: you shall be unable to marry until you find Snow White, Fire Red." And having said this, she departed. Now the young prince did not know what the old woman could mean, but he took a piece of paper and wrote down the mysterious name she had uttered. When he grew up, his parents said, "Dear son, it is time that you found a bride." But it was then that the prince remembered the old woman's words. He took the piece of paper from where he had kept it in a little chest all those years, and read it again. "Mother, father," he said, "I must go. I must journey across the wide world until I find Snow White, Fire Red." And nothing his parents could say would dissuade him. He set out and journeyed, now this way, now that way, to strange lands he had never seen and never heard of. For many months he wandered here and there. One night he came to a wide plain. In the middle of this plain was a house. The house was very large. It had no doors and only one high window. The prince could not find a way in, so he lay down under a tree near the house and slept. Now in the morning he heard large thudding footsteps from far off, and who should emerge into the plain but Mama Draga, the ogress. Now Mama Draga headed straight for the house, and when she arrived under the window, she looked up and called, "Snow White, Fire Red, let down your flaming hair." Immediately, a cascade of long red hair came tumbling out the window, and Mama Draga climbed up. Well, thought the prince, this is how one might enter that house. So he waited. That evening, he saw that Mama Draga was leaving, and when he had waited a while and was sure that she was truly gone, he himself went and stood under the window. "Snow White, Fire Red, let down your flaming hair," called the prince, pretending as well as he could to be Mama Draga. The hair came tumbling down, and the prince climbed up, hand over hand over hand. When he reached the window, he clambered in, and there he found the most beautiful young woman he had ever laid eyes on. "Who are you?" he asked. "My name is Snow White Fire Red," she said. "And until you came in, Mama Draga was the only one I had seen for years. She keeps me in this house, though I would dearly wish to leave." The prince and Snow White Fire Red talked for hours. Each told the other the story of their life. Then, after much time together, they made a plan that the two of them could leave. The prince hid in a large cupboard, and when Mama Draga came back, Snow White Fire Red poured her wine from a large bottle that she had taken down from a shelf. Mama Draga drank the wine. "Have some more," said Snow White Fire Red, and she poured her another glass. Mama Draga drank this one too, and after more glasses of wine, she had begun to lose count. Mama Draga, the ogress, became quite drunk. "Snow White Fire Red," she said, "you like it here, in the house where I come to visit you, don't you?" "Indeed I do, Mother," said Snow White Fire Red. "You would never wish to leave me?" said Mama Draga. "No, indeed, Mother," said Snow White Fire Red. "But how would I leave you? I don't even know how it could be done." "Oh, that's easy," said Mama Draga, and because she had drunk so much wine, she did not think to keep her secrets. "Well, you see, all you would have to do is ask every bit of furniture in the room to lie for you. That way, when I came, I would not know you were missing, and I would lose ever so much time. You would also need to take the 7 balls of yarn from the cupboard. If I ever caught up to you, all you'd have to do is throw a ball of yarn over your shoulder, and it would stop me in my tracks, for they are magic." Now, after she had told Snow White Fire Red these secrets, Mama Draga began to nod her head, and she fell asleep. She snored the snore of an ogress. Snow White Fire Red tiptoed over to the cupboard where the prince was hiding. "Did you hear everything?" she asked. The prince nodded. "I did. Tomorrow we shall be able to escape together." Now the next day, when Mama Draga had left, Snow White Fire Red went around the room and asked every bit of furniture in it to call out to the ogress and pretend to be her. Then she and the prince took the 7 balls of magic yarn from the cupboard. With great difficulty, they climbed down the sides of the house. They had to cling to every handhold they could find. They almost fell many times, but after much effort, they made their way to the ground, and off they ran. Now, sometime later, Mama Draga came into the clearing. She stopped beneath the window and called up, "Snow White Fire Red, let down your flaming hair." "Coming, Mama," called the chair in Snow White Fire Red's voice. Mama Draga waited, but nothing happened. "Snow White Fire Red," she called, "let down your flaming hair." "Coming, Mama," called the table in Snow White Fire Red's voice. Mama Draga waited, but nothing happened. "Snow White Fire Red," called Mama Draga, "let down your flaming hair." "Coming, Mama," called the mirror but still, nothing happened. Mama Draga grew worried. Taking her ogre nails, she climbed up the wall of the house, sharp claws biting into the wood. She made her way into the room and saw no one at all. "What? I've been tricked," she cried. "You'll pay for this, you little wretch!" Then she climbed down the side of the house with her ogress talons, and she went running down the road. She sniffed the wind with her ogre nostrils and was able to catch the scent of Snow White Fire Red and the prince. She ran faster and faster and faster, and she had nearly caught up with Snow White Fire Red when Snow White Fire Red tossed over her shoulder the first ball of yarn. As soon as it hit the ground, the yarn turned into a tall mountain. Mama Draga had no choice but to clamber over this mountain. It took her quite some time, but when she had reached the other side, she began to run again. She ran and ran and ran and ran and ran until she had nearly caught up with Snow White Fire Red and the prince, when Snow White Fire Red took the second ball of yarn and tossed it over her shoulder, and when the second ball of yarn hit the ground, it became a deep, rocky chasm. Mama Draga had to climb down into this chasm and all the way back up the other side. And when she reached the other side, she went running again, faster and faster and faster. When she had nearly caught up Snow White Fire Red, threw the third ball of yarn over her shoulder. This ball of yarn became a wide, rushing river, and Mama Draga had to struggle across the river. She was nearly swept away, but she made it to the other side. She went running and running and running, and when she had almost caught up Snow White Fire Red, threw the fourth ball of yarn over her shoulder, and when it hit the ground, this fourth ball of yarn became a dense forest of trees and tangled vines. Mama Draga had to make her way through this forest. It was almost too thick for her, but she pulled the trees aside and ripped down the vines, and she was able to make her way to the other side. She went running faster and faster and faster, and when she had almost caught up to Snow White Fire Red and the prince, Snow White Fire Red took the fifth ball of yarn and threw it over her shoulder. This ball of yarn became a wide trough filled with vipers and poisonous toads. Mama Draga had to wade through these beasts, which bit her and stung her. Oh, what terrible pain she felt, but she made her way to the other side, and on she ran, closer and closer and closer, until Snow White Fire Red threw the sixth ball of yarn over her shoulder, and this ball of yarn became a lake of bubbling pitch. Mama Draga had to swim through the lake, and the pitch stuck to her skin. Oh, how terrible it was! Well, when she got to the other side, she was almost too exhausted to go on, but she found her last bit of strength and ran. Mama Draga had almost caught up to Snow White Fire Red. She reached out her ogre arms, but Snow White Fire Red took the seventh and final ball of yarn and threw it over her shoulder. A great wall of fire sprung up. Mama Draga was scared, but she charged through the fire, and when she reached the other side, she was so terribly burned that she could not go on. She fell to her knees and called out, "You may have escaped, Snow White Fire Red, but Your prince will no longer be yours. At the first kiss from his mother, he will forget that you ever existed." And having said these words, Mama Draga collapsed and died. Snow White Fire Red heard everything the ogress had said. She and the prince ran on and on and on, and after much weary travel, they arrived at the edge of the city where the prince lived with his mother and father. "You wait here," said the prince. "I will go home to the palace where I live with my mother and father, the queen and king. I will bring back some fine clothes that you may change into so that you can meet my royal family." Snow White Fire Red did not like the sound of this. "What about what Mama Draga said?" she asked. "If your mother kisses you, you will forget all about me, for such is the power of her terrible curse." "I will not let her kiss me," said the prince. "This I promise." Well, Snow White Fire Red agreed. The prince went back to his palace, and when he made his way into the throne room, his father and mother rushed forward with a start, for they had nearly despaired of ever seeing him again. They reached out their arms to hug him, but the prince drew back. "Do not hug me, do not kiss me," he said. "Why ever not?" said his parents. "We are so glad to see you alive and well." "I made a solemn vow. I cannot be hugged, and I cannot, above all, be kissed. Tomorrow morning I must go out again, and you will see why." Well, that night the prince lay asleep in his room. His mother, the queen, quietly opened the door, and she could not resist creeping over to the bed and giving her son a small kiss. The next morning, when the prince awoke, he had forgotten everything. "Do you wish to go out again?" his mother and father asked him. "Go out? I do recall that I said that I must, but I cannot remember why," said the prince. It was as if he were lost in a strange fog. Snow White Fire Red, for her part, was left waiting by the side of the road. She waited for days and nights. Though the wind blew and the rain fell, she did not move. Now, after quite some time, a kindly old woman came by. "Come, dear," she said. "You look like you could use a hot meal and a warm bed." Snow White Fire Red nodded her head. The kind old woman took her in. She gave her food and drink. Snow White Fire Red was very grateful. One day, Snow White Fire Red heard that there was going to be a great feast at the palace. "So," she said, "it's true. My prince has forgotten me." And she took 2 little white birds down from a cage where they perched in the old woman's corner. She begged of the old woman to go and buy some beautiful silk from the market. And when the old woman had brought the silk back to her, she cut and sewed it into 2 darling little suits of clothing for the doves. Then she opened the cage and whispered carefully in the doves' ears. The doves flew away and perched on the windowsill of the grand banquet hall of the palace. All who saw them were charmed to see them wearing such wonderful clothes. The doves flew in and perched on the table near where the queen, the king, and the prince were eating. Now, the female dove spoke as though she were Snow White Fire Red, and the male dove spoke as though he were the prince. "Do you remember the 2 fountains, one of oil and one of wine?" said the female dove. "I remember," said the male. "Do you remember the old woman's warning?" "I remember." Do you remember the plain and the great house? I remember. By this time, all had put down their forks and spoons. They sat transfixed as they listened to the words of the two doves. Do you remember the ogress? I remember. Do you remember the 7 balls of yarn? I remember. Do you remember the terrible flight? I remember. Do you remember your promise? I remember. Then why, oh why, have you forgotten me, Snow White, Fire Red? And when the prince heard the dove's words, it was as if a veil had been lifted from before his eyes. Instantly, he recalled his beloved. The 2 doves took wing and flew from the room. Quickly, he called to his servants, watch where the doves go. And the servants saw that the doves had flown down to a little cottage at the edge of the city. The prince made his way there without delay. He knocked on the door. Snow White, Fire Red opened it, and they fell into each other's arms. Now he introduced his bride to his 2 parents. They were married without delay, and never again was the prince separated from Snow White, Fire Red.